motion was made by Alderman Skates and seconded by Alderman Poxa to approve the Vanderwall proposal for services in regards to Hillmoor property concept plan. Alderman Skates?
Yeah, I've got just some here, but I just wanted to touch base on some of the key points. First of all, the intention of the current zoning was a placeholder. Rural holding and private recreation in 2011, when we reverted back, and I was on the Plan Commission back then. When we did that, private recreation, the hope was back then, Hank will talk about this, Mr. Keith was on that Blue Ribbon Committee. Our hope was that we could get Hillmoor back in place in 2011. And so the thought was, and I've got the minutes from that meeting, and then the council approved it, but the conversation with Barney was, why rural holding and why private recreation? Well, ultimately it was a placeholder. There is some SR4, if you go off the end of the neighborhood over there, there is some SR4 that we designated that also. But the majority of it was the rural holding with the private recreation, again, in hopes that it would be a golf course. Leaving Hillmoor the way it is, long grass, trees down, targets for vandalism, is not an option. The silent majority, that's residents and non-residents, are begging for the city to provide direction to this eyesore. When I ran a year and a half ago, I had voted for the previous plan, and I still stand by that vote. I felt that it was a good move to get low. It wasn't high impact, it wasn't big box. If you look at the minutes, and I'm not talking about just the conversations had here at FLR in previous meetings, it was not, we didn't propose big box then, and I think there were 3 out of, I don't remember how many. It was close and there was conversation, but I know some of the aldermen weren't convinced because they thought there was a chance of maybe big box. I know the desire of this group and conversations that we have had open at Plan Commission, FLR, and Council. We have talked about not wanting big box, but having actually a lot of the things that have been brought up in the community workshops. In my neighborhood, second district conversations, and I get a ton of neighbors, there was no desire to purchase Hillmoor. There was a huge desire to make it useful and give it something more than what it had. People want to get into Hillmoor. And so listening to a proposal, giving us some options, and I want to give you some examples. And these are things that have come up in workshops in the past month. We've had kind of the same group of people, and I would encourage I think there's now 24 people watching this on TV. I would encourage people at home to come to anything we have in the future. Please make yourself known, because there are other opinions out there. But some support that we've had at Hillmoor, development is the boogeyman, and it's the bad word. But development includes a Gateway Tech campus. It includes a rehab facility, a healthcare facility, a church, a library, a post office, a visitor center, an ice skating rink, indoor and outdoor. We've got a lot of people that are really interested in indoor ice skating rink, a soccer facility, splash pad, a driving range. Those are just some things, and I hit on some of the more popular ones. I will tell you there were some that were ones that I wouldn't repeat. This proposal puts the city in the driver's seat versus a annual puzzled Plan Commission and Council reaction, and it gives us an opportunity to tell not a developer but a landowner, and that landowner could be at Hillmoor, that landowner could be Dave Adams at his farm, that landowner could be Mr. Pritzker on the south side of town. Anybody that's got a parcel that's this significant and could impact our city, I want us to be driving that. I don't want to have a proposal of Lake Hillmoor, roller coaster. Right now it could be a water park. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but right now we've set ourselves up to be all kinds of things that are a component of the zoning and the use right now. It could be some things that we do not want it to be, and I won't go into the long list, but rendering, there are all kinds of things that could be at Hillmoor right now. And so a third of this parcel is already green space. We talked about we want to make it a big park. A third of this parcel is already green space due to the way it's put together. But we could have additional bike trails, playgrounds, park and rides. We've talked about a park and ride and having a place where people can come in, park, and then walk or ride into town. It's perfect transition to perfect access. This could be achieved through the carefully designed long-term plan for this parcel. something important, proposing, this green space just to leave it alone, and if you leave it alone like it is and don't want anything done on it, you're left with what we have now, and none of us, whatever side you're on, none of us want our entrance to the city to look like what it looks like right now. Telling a developer, telling a landowner, I don't care if it's Hillmoor or anybody else around, that the only thing that can be is a park, in effect, what you've done is you've condemned the property. When you condemn the property and you give the guy no recourse, guy or gal recourse, do anything else, when you condemn that property, you basically have bought that property. And when you buy a property, if it's eminent domain that the city's forced into falling into, and I'm not throwing these wild things out like Mr. Malman throws out, and some conjecture, and the zoning, and the contract. This is real facts, guys and gals. If we push this, that we only want this to be a park, and this group overrules anybody that's got common sense and is looking for the long-term future, not just us, but our kids and our grandkids, looking at that and saying, we don't want it to be anything but a park. We've condemned the property, we've in effect bought the property, buying the property of the city of Lake Geneva in its best use, and that's what we would end up paying. We wouldn't pay the value, we would pay its end use. Could be 15, could be $20 million, plus the maintenance. And we've had conversations with PD, the fire department, and the street department. That could be $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I know the guys and gals that are here, you feel like you're at the majority, and I've been at all the workshops, and it's not been pretty, and the conversations have not been polite. But I will tell you, in my conversations with people out in the neighborhood, they don't want this on their taxes. They don't want to pay for Hillmoor, and they love the idea of getting some usefulness out of Hillmoor. And I'm telling you, if you spend some time in your neighborhoods, you live in town, if you go to your neighbors and say, are you willing to buy Hillmoor and are you willing to maintain it? I'll tell you right now, anybody that's got a nut in their head is going to say absolutely not. So I want to say to this council, and ultimately the Plan Commission is going to see this as a group, I'm asking you guys to think about the taxpayers. They're counting on you to make a rational decision and not anything that's putting us into contract zoning. It's not going to put us into a lawsuit. We're doing something that we know we should do, and I would encourage you to be courageous and finally grab onto this one and do the right thing. And I think this is a great proposal.
First of all, I think it's sad that we've gotten to the point that we have, and all the time I've been on the council and as editor of the paper, that we reduced this to personal attacks and conspiracy theories. And I think that Alderman Skates is very thoughtful in his approach, and I think he's right that there are a whole lot of people out there who would support this. I think many of them are afraid to speak up at the committees for the fear that they're going to be shot down. Nonetheless, I think there were a lot of good points made beyond the personal, and I don't think we should be obligated to something that was thought of in 2011.
Alderman Flower.
So I guess I caution that we don't just think about this as development. You know, I mean, there's a lot of alternatives coming. There's always a do nothing option. What happens if you do nothing? Then what happens if you do, you know, something that's, you know, some form of you know, things that we're hearing from the public, some forms of things we're hearing from developers. What happens if we can't make that happen, or we don't find someone that wants to make something like that happen? What if we have to do it ourselves as a community? And what if that cost is too great? And then we say, okay, well, what are we willing to still keep and sacrifice in order to keep the green space and get some of the things we want, like maybe the parking and the paths and such? Maybe if we can't make that happen, then what are we willing to be okay with? It shouldn't just be what three pieces of development are we willing to think are the best. It should be all of those should be part of what we're discussing. It should be very open, brainstorming alternatives. It shouldn't just be one-sided, one way or the other. And it's my understanding that's why we couldn't let someone else give us a proposal on that, because they don't own the property. The city can do it as a whole, as a discussion with all of us, and it should be all alternatives discussed. And I don't think that we should just pick one and then that's what we come to the public with. They're a part of this discussion. That's why we're having this conversation. So I think we just need to be careful about how we are phrasing it in this proposal. I think only one coming to the public is not a good idea. They need to be part of this discussion.
Alderman Strawbey.
I was gonna say exactly that. I think what I found tonight, we heard over and over is, if there's 3 options given and the public only hears one, that's not fair.
There's the Sean Kelly park plan there. And I think, and I said this before, and it was not met with a lot of favor at the particular place, but I think we have to be realistic, and this is our largest piece of vacant property in the heart of our city. And per that plan, the Friends of Hillmoor wanted to be a park. My granddaughter and her friends wanted to be a unicorn ranch. Neither is realistic. In public comments this last year, the 192-acre privately owned property has been referred to as the Central Park of Lake Geneva or the Millennium Park of Lake Geneva. Both are preposterous. First and foremost, remember that this property is not owned by the city and never has been. To become a public park, 3 events would have to happen. First, if the current owners were willing to sell, and that's an if, the city would have to purchase the property. Second, the city would have to develop the property into a park. And third, the city would have to maintain the park. Each of these events cost money, the taxpayers' money. And how much would that cost the taxpayers? The current owners reportedly paid $3.5 million for the property. As they have been described in various public comments as greedy developers, we have to assume that they wouldn't sell it for less than they paid. So let's pretend that it could be bought for $6 million, give or take. Then the really big question is, how do we assign a price to develop the park as it is drawn by Sean Kelly, the Williams Bay landscape architect? We've never heard a number on this. So let's use the Williams Bay park plan that Sean Kelly presented to the Village of Williams Bay in August of this year at a cost of $55,000 design price tag. The Lake Geneva Regional News, and the article came out August 22nd here, and there's Mr. Kelly on the front. The Regional News reported that the 22-acre park that Mr. Kelly designed for the Village of Williams Bay would cost nearly $7 million to build. Hillmoor is 192 acres. 192 acres divided by 22 is roughly 8. Would developing the Sean Kelly plan for Lake Geneva cost 8 times more than the Sean Kelly design for Williams Bay? 56 million taxpayer dollars? Most likely not. So let's assume that there are some cost efficiencies that we would have that cut the cost in half. 28 million taxpayer dollars. What would it cost to maintain a 192-acre, $28 million taxpayer dollar? $28 million taxpayer dollar park? Maybe we could get it done cheaply, and as Alderman Skates talked about, staff has looked at it, and they guessed about somewhere around $500,000 a year. When you add up all the numbers, divided evenly among all the taxable properties in the city of Lake Geneva, we would have to raise each property owner's taxes by roughly $6,885. How about we do nothing with the existing land use designation for the property? That's a question that's been asked. That would allow the current owners to develop it as a park and gift it to the city. Clearly, that is not going to happen. It would allow them to develop it as a private park, which is equally not going to happen. Or they could develop it as a Wisconsin Dells water park. I cannot imagine there's anyone within earshot who wants the city of Lake Geneva to become more like the Dells. So the land use designation needs to change. To what? We on this council and on the Plan Commission are not city planners. However, we have hired a professional city planner who could prepare a number of concepts for us that reflect what we believe is the most realistic and responsible use for the property. to do that, we would have to invest the taxpayers' money that we do currently have into making sure that if and when the property owners develop their plan for their property, it is done right and it is what we want.
The comments that have been made to me on this issue are, A, it's a done deal.
Yep.
There's a conspiracy going on, there's handshakes under the table, well, none of that is true. What I'm looking for out of this presentation is I'm looking for ideas. I'm not looking for them to come down to one thing that we're all gonna vote for and say, yeah, that's the way to go. I wanna see what's possible, and I want everybody to know what's possible. I want any developers that may come in to know what we think is possible, and that includes leaving it alone. I personally would rather leave it alone, but it may not, as you said, it may not be possible to do that fiscally. But, yeah, I resent the idea that people are sitting here saying that we're making backroom deals and it's a done deal, and it's just nonsense. I want information, and that's why I would go for this point.
And I will suggest that, last year, the median price of a house in Lake Geneva was $188,000, and the median, income for a family of four was somewhere around $48,000. That makes it tough not only for people to buy lunch for the kids, but it also makes it tough for them to own a house. So if we keep the housing stock limited, and much of it, as we know, is getting eaten up for short-term rentals, people the values of the property are gonna continue to go up, and more people are gonna continue to be left out of home ownership. This is an opportunity for the city to look at this and say, all right, what sort of characteristics of housing do we need in our community? Do we need more 1 acre lots with 4-bedroom houses? You know, that's one thing, but I think that leaves out a big segment of our population. So those are some of the characteristics we can look at as well. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Munson. Yes,
So there was also a discussion about, spending a certain dollar value and whether we need to go out to RFP. Can someone address that?
We're assisting clients right now. We've got a contract with them.
What was that? Couldn't hear you.
Can't hear.
It's really hard to hear in the back, unless you use your mics.
Don't use your conspiracy.
They are existing planners. It would be a waste of time to go out for an RFP. They're already working on their land use plan. This is simply a modification of the existing contract we have them doing for our land use plan.
So similar to how we handle our city engineer, they kind of do the same thing when they do our street plan, even though their design work hours are more than, or costs are more than that dollar value is allowed.
and I did find it interesting that for a 22 acre parcel, that the fee was $55,000 in Williamsburg.
That was to do a similar thing, or is that to design a,
That was to design a park.
to design it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe Lake Geneva gets a better deal.
They're not gonna design parks.
Anyone else?
It's not a
All
park.
done.
At the Geneva Lake Environmental Agency meeting, all of the other government bodies on the lake have signed on for the eradication of the starry stone wart. Lake Geneva has not, and the reason is because Lake Geneva wants to hear a dollar figure. I think if we can't sign on to eliminate the starry stone wart without hearing a dollar figure, I don't think we should sign on for this until we see the bottom line figure of the cost.
You know, it's really kind of off agenda item, but just in rebuttal to that, the only reason that we didn't sign on for, with Geneva Lake Environmental Agency was because they didn't have a plan at the time. It was basically asking for an open checkbook with no plan. Now they have a plan, and as soon as they want to bring that forward to us, I'm sure that we will support everything and anything that they want to do, but they needed a plan. I guess I do have a question though regarding
If we could return back to the subject at hand.
yes,
Yeah.
thanks, sorry for that.
Thank you.
The RFP, you know, between what we have today in front of us versus what was looked at a few years ago, I'm assuming that task-related items are different on this deliverable than what was previous? I don't know if anyone, maybe since he's not up here anymore, someone else can answer that?
I can you answer that, Mr. Moore?
So the many different proposals, yes. If you go back to the first feasibility study, that was looking at basic projections off of total developable acreage. So in essence, looking at the entire parcel, how much acreage would end up having to be open space in terms of stormwater management or dedicated parks, how much would then be dedicated to residential use on a bulk level. So this is gross acreage, so not taking out for streets or different components. You'd be looking at basically an analysis of potential outcomes, so square footage and units yields for different development scenarios. This is getting then the last proposal was for a more detailed plan, a set of plans that would get down to a much closer and finer grained scale in looking at character from the standpoint of a detailed block and street pattern and proposed use on a block level, not quite getting to lot level. This is in between the two. So this was requested to bring costs down, but to give a better understanding of the character components. It is a little more detailed in the original gross calculations, but not as detailed as the previous proposal.
Yeah, so if we were interested in having more than one plan, I mean, I guess can you explain how you were envisioning getting the public input with only having one alternative going to the public? I don't quite understand that.
So what we were going to be presenting to this body and the plan commission were 3 different alternatives that looked at development options for the site. And they could be a range of options. Again, we don't have a plan in front of us that we're here saying it's A, B, or C. It could be A, B, G, whatever. The point was to deliver that to this body for consideration, to try to distill it down to a preferred alternative, and then present that preferred alternative for feedback.
Oh, sorry. So who's gonna give you this input that you're gonna start these 3 alternatives? Where's that coming from?
Those will be based on our analysis of the potential development for this site. This is something we do a lot of. This is different than your typical comp planning. I actually head up a lot of development proposals. For clarity, I do not work for free, just to make that abundantly clear. But we do a lot of analysis of properties at this scale or bigger in looking at what potential development outcomes could be delivered based on the developability of the site. So it's looking at using our professional experience and understanding of how projects get put together to develop different scenarios, and they're going to be illustrative in scope. And the point is to illustrate different potential outcomes, so there can be a dialogue about this, not this. It's not intended for all 3 that each would be, we support element B. There may be pieces of each that mix and match and become the final element of the final adopted plan.
Any other questions? Alderman Flower, then Alderman Dunn.
Oh, let him go, go ahead.
A couple of things. We're not Genoa City or Walworth or Zenda, and we're not begging people to come and develop Lake Geneva. We have a very valuable town here. They are coming to us. They should be begging.
Yes.
They should be paying for this. We don't own that property, that's correct. And when I was in private business, and I don't know, government might be different. I'm sure it's different in Illinois. But when somebody had a proposal for me, they paid for it. They brought the proposal. And I listened. We didn't. This is exactly turned around, and we don't have to do that. We're Lake Geneva. If we were Zenda and we wanted development, yes, we might have to put some proposal out there. We're not Zenda. We're Lake Geneva.
We've heard that a lot, that we're doing the developer's work. Can you clarify what you think the final product would be?
A very significant difference in approach. This has been done, we've worked with many different communities that have done an approach like this to identify upfront what are the key components they want to see. rather than wait for a developer to propose, well, maybe we'll give you the park space that's around the corner on the backside of the site. If the community says, we really value the frontage and that needs to be incorporated into the character of the community, it's better to tell the development community that aspect up front, so that they can then develop their plans and respond to what the community's telling them, instead of the community trying to negotiate after they have submitted a plan, which in all intents and purposes, their plan may meet the standards, regardless of what the zoning is. So you are then at a defensive position as a community to try to say, no, we appreciate you spent a lot of money doing this, but we want to re-scramble it because we really feel these components needed to be handled differently. It's better for all parties involved for those known components to be identified and portrayed and told to the development community, so then they can respond, and they still will have to respond. They still will have to come with a proposal that meets whatever plan is adopted, and they would then have to propose and prove how they've achieved the goals the community laid out for the development of this project.
Thank you for that clarification. Anyone else?
I mean, it sounds to me like it's basically a comprehensive plan, but for a specific area versus the entire city.
Correct. Typically, that's been referred to as a special area plan. In other communities where they've looked at key properties or things or opportunities they want to analyze, can be done at many different scales, whether it's at this scale, larger, or even down to block by block basis. We've seen other communities and other consultants propose special area plans that help guide the future redevelopment or redevelopment of existing parcels.
Basically, it's like how you can't build a building taller than the Capitol in Madison. Just guidelines so that then developers, when they come in, know what they can and can't do.
Yes, that's correct.
And stay within the current comprehensive plan.
Anyone else? Alderman Flower?
Well, it just sounds like we're just talking about development though. So there's not gonna be, and what you're providing to us here, there's not gonna be I mean, I know that you've done your back of the napkin sketch of your numbers, and thank you for coming up with that, but is there anything like that, like what could be developed on that, like, are you gonna help us understand the context of what could happen there if we do nothing and keep everything the way it is? Is that gonna be part of this discussion?
If that's the will of the city, we can. I can tell you that I've represented enough developers, when they approach a property, they're looking at how do they leverage the development in support of their program, not necessarily how do they leverage their property in support of the community they're in. So when you think about uses that would fit under the guise of the current designation, take a water park for example, they're going to be looking to design and program this property in support of two things. One is either inviting the public in on a ticket-paying basis to support their facility, or selling rooms. They're not going to be in a scenario where they are setting aside significant open space for the benefit of the public that doesn't generate revenue. So that's a different approach of, while the current designation, yes, there are options that could be developed, the likelihood of those options representing large-scale public amenities outside of the facility itself is fairly low. So we can illustrate what some of those could look like. We could hopefully do a much better job than some of the water parks in Lake Delton or the Wisconsin Dells. But the reality is, when you look at any of those properties, they utilize their properties to the benefit of their program, and not necessarily to the benefit of the public, from the sense of, yes, they would be a taxpayer, and yes, they would generate a significant exposure. But to say that they would have a large parks and open space component is fairly unlikely.
Anyone else? Alderman Dunn?
If Hillmoor were Green Acres, Vanderwall and Associates would be Mr. Haney. They have something for us every time, and if we don't buy, they come back with something else. Again, we're Lake Geneva. People have to come to us. We don't have to spend money. We need the money to defeat the starry storm ward and fix our roads.
I just want to say we are Lake Geneva, and we want to make sure this property, this huge piece of property, maintains the character that we want in Lake Geneva. That's what this study is for. It's not for the developer. So, and I hear a lot of the same conversation. We want a lot of green space. We want a lot of pedestrian bike paths. I hear this on both sides of the table. We're not that far apart. I really believe that. But this is for the city.
The motion was made and seconded to, approve the vendor proposal for services in regards to Hillmoor property concept plan. Please use the voting machine to record your votes. It passes 6 votes yes, Alderman Dunn and Alderman Alderson voting no. Thank you